Welcome to Box Recaps. Today I'm going to explain the movie Secret Zoo, released in the year 2020. The movie opens and we see a man named Kang Tai-soo is seen traveling to his office. Before, he had been to see the vice president of his company, Min Chul-hyun, who has been arrested for embezzlement. Tai-soo shows the man some newspaper clippings about him and lights a cigarette for him. In the car, Tai-soo gets a call from his sister who wants him to sue some kids who have been bullying her son at school. He tells her that kids can get rough and there's no need to sue, but his sister believes him to be a hotshot lawyer and wants him to scare the parents. Tai-soo reminds her that he is a lowly temp at the firm, running errands that no one else will. Basically, Tai-soo works at a law firm, but unfortunately for him, he has been unable to climb the ladder and become successful. He has been stuck as an assistant for a long time and desperately wishes to get promoted to a permanent position. But in addition to his personal bad luck, the law firm he works at is also facing issues as the company has been under scrutiny for its corruption, as we saw with the vice president in jail. We see Tai-soo arrive at the firm called JH Law, where a mob has gathered outside, demanding that the company apologize and be punished for being unjust and exploitative. Tai-soo goes in, but is unable to use his employee card. A guard comes up to check the problem and tells him that temporary cards need to be renewed, rubbing salt in Tai-soo's wounds. Upstairs, Tai-soo tries talking to a senior about his visit to Min, and she brushes him off. We can see how undervalued Tai-soo is. Later, as Tai-soo is leaving, he runs into his old college friend, Song, who has made it to an associate position at JH. Song invites Tai-soo to a reunion, saying that everyone is curious to catch up with him, but Tai-soo lies, saying that he has an appointment. But his friend sees right through his lie and tells him that there's no need to be ashamed and that he should still come. They argue, and Tai-soo tells him to stop lecturing him every time they meet and that he doesn't need any friends like him. Outside, we see the company's president, Hwang, leaving the office building as well, but just as he's about to get into his car, the protesters outside follow him and accuse him of his wrongdoings. Despite his secretary's advice of ignoring the mob, this provokes Hwang, and he gets into a fight with the protesters. Seeing his boss in trouble, Tai-soo rushes to him and holds back the protesters long enough so that Hwang can be driven away. As he leaves, the president notices how Tai-soo jumped into action. Later, Hwang is in a meeting with Min Chul-hyun's sister, Min Chae-ryung. She is also the vice president of the Rakwon Group. Tai-soo also arrives there after being summoned by Oh, Hwang's secretary, and is introduced to Kim, who pays him no such mind. After she leaves, Hwang talks to Tai-soo about his CV and his hopes of working for the Mergers and Acquisitions Department. We also find out that Tai-soo has been working for JH for 8 months. Hwang then tells Tai-soo about one of their UK-based clients, William and Gabriel, who are an equity fund. They have recently bought a Korean property, Dongsan Park, which is a zoo. They have given JH full managerial authority to restructure the business, and once the zoo picks up business, they're going to sell it for a large amount of money. This means that Tai-soo will be a zoo manager and will have 3 months to get the zoo back on track. For this, Hwang promises him Tai-soo will be given a permanent position at the company, in the M&A department. Tai-soo immediately agrees and says he will do his best. Later, we see Tai-soo driving to the zoo in a red Mercedes convertible given to him by the company. Upon arriving at Dongsan Park, Tai-soo discovers that things are worse than he could have imagined. For starters, there are no animals, apart from a temperamental polar bear, and the staff has been reduced to almost nothing. Increasingly worried, Tai-soo meets up with what remains of the staff. This includes the former director Seo, the vet Han, Kim Hae-kyung, and Kim Gun-wook. They bring him up to date and inform him that the animals were taken by loan sharks, to whom the previous owners owed money. Tai-soo then reveals that he is their new director, which causes Seo to get up to leave. But Tai-soo convinces him to stay on, as they will require all his hard-earned experience and expertise to revitalize the zoo. Finally, Seo agrees. Later, everyone goes to have lunch, and Tai-soo brainstorms ideas. The first logical idea is that they buy animals. But Dr. Han tells him that they can't simply purchase endangered animals. They can keep them for research or breeding purposes after putting in a request, but that whole procedure can take up more than the 3 months they have. That night, as Tae-soo is walking drunkenly with Seo to the director's cabin, he gets the scare of his life after he mistakes a stuffed tiger for the real thing. Meanwhile, Dr. Han goes home and works through a video call to check on some animal patients before getting in bed with her cat. There's a picture frame of her as a little girl with a small polar bear. We then see Hae-kyung go to the convenience store near the zoo, which is owned by her very rude boyfriend. We find out that he had taken a large sum of money from her to set it up, but he is upset as, since the zoo closed, he has not been getting enough customers. The next day, Tae-soo calls Hwang to give him an update and also tell him about the dire situation at the zoo. But Hwang simply tells him to return if he's unable to handle the job. But this would mean that Tae-soo has no future at JH, and no other prospects either. He tells Hwang that he will carry out the job at any cost. After the call, Tae-soo notices some pictures framed on the wall, specifically the pictures taken at the soft toy contest, in which people are holding stuffed animals. This sparks an idea in his mind. He goes to the staff, dressed in a Tigger the Tiger costume, and proposes that they all dress up in animal costumes and pose as real animals. He explains that if seen at a distance, it will be easy to fool people into thinking that the animals are real. The staff is skeptical, but Hae-kyung and Gun-wook get Tae-soo's vibe and are soon on board, willing to take this drastic measure to save their zoo. But Dr. Han is not happy. She thinks that they are all being ridiculous and storms out. Tae-soo finds her in front of the polar bear, Blacknose, and they talk about how she had become a vet because of this polar bear, and how dedicated she is to the polar bear. Tae-soo appeals to her, saying that they have no other option and need to take this risk to save the zoo so that Dr. Han can continue taking care of the polar bear. The team then heads over to a movie costume designer recommended by Tae-soo's friend Song and asks them to design animal costumes for them. They ask questions like if it can be realistic enough, and the guy says that even Hollywood uses costume animals for commercials and such, so it will be believable from a distance. They ask for a lion, a gorilla, a sloth, and a polar bear, and the guy says he will deliver in about 10 days. Meanwhile, they all decide who's going to wear which costume. Gun-wook and Seo decide to take the heavier costumes, the gorilla and the polar bear, while the girls take the lion and the sloth. Tae-soo has them all practicing their animal behaviors, but they all feel super weird acting out as animals. Seo eventually suggests they hire actors, but Tae-soo is concerned about their secret being safe. There is a funny sequence as all the staff members practice being the animal and do their research. Finally, the costumes arrive, and they try them on. Tae-soo directs them to go further and further back so that they can pass off as being believable. However, the costumes are heavy, itchy, and claustrophobic, and the staff finds it hard to carry on. But their dedication to the zoo is strong, and they don't give up. Soon they have their opening day on a weekend, so that the crowd is not too much. A bus of seniors and kindergarten children arrives. Hae-kyung barely holds on to the branch as the children observe her. Dr. Han has to keep facing the audience so that they don't see the legs, which is a dead giveaway. Meanwhile, Gun-wook does his enthusiastic gorilla act, but Seo is too worried about being found out and keeps hiding behind a rock. Eventually, the first day comes to an end, and the team is exhausted. Tae-soo tells them all they had to do was act cute, and Dr. Han tells him that if he thinks it's so easy, then he should try it. This shuts up Tae-soo, and he says they will try to be better tomorrow. Eventually, the group gets better, and no one suspects a thing. Later, they calculate the number of visitors they got, and the number is a disappointing 73. This is even lower than what they got before the zoo closed. Tae-soo says that they desperately need a giraffe. In the meantime, Hae-kyung's boyfriend has broken up with her, and Gun-wook discovers her crying in the meerkat's enclosure. Angry at Seung-min for using Hae-kyung like this, Gun-wook gets worked up and storms into the convenience store dressed up as a gorilla. He gives Seung-min a good scare, growling in his face and thumping his chest, and also goes on to mess up the shop a little as well. Seung-min reports the incident to the police, who don't take him seriously and think him to be crazy. The next day, as everyone reports to their enclosures, Seung-min calls Hae-kyung, thinking that she has trained a gorilla to attack him. Learning about the call, she rushes out from the sloth enclosure to pick up the call, but runs into Sung Min, who is initially scared to see an animal out of the cage, but soon gives chase. Hae-kyung starts screaming for help, and Gun-wook attacks Sung Min, injuring him badly. The whole story comes out to Sung Min, who is astonished at the staff, asking them what they were thinking. Hae-kyung convinces him to keep their secret, and he agrees if Gun-wook would apologize to him, and Gun-wook is forced to do so. After that, Seo one day falls ill from sitting in the sun all day long in a hot costume, and Tae-soo is forced to take over. He quickly realizes that trying to act like an animal is not easy to do, and it is made worse by being harassed by some people who throw things at him. Later, after they leave, Tae-soo is tempted to drink the bottle of Coca-Cola that a visitor had thrown at him and takes a big gulp, thinking that no one is there. However, a couple catches the bear drinking from a bottle and makes a video. By the next day, the Coca-Cola drinking polar bear's video has gone viral, and there's a huge crowd at the zoo. That weekend, the zoo turns over $1,000 in profit. A representative from JH arrives and informs Tae-soo that their request for animal purchases has been accepted. That night, Tae-soo talks to Song on call and asks him about the company Gabriel. Song reveals that it is a shell company owned by Hwang himself. One day, Gun-wook notices Hae-kyung crying and takes her out for food, and the two of them bond. That night, Tae-soo notices Black Nose outside in the enclosure and finds Han watching an old video of Black Nose and herself. She tells him about his behavior and how he's not happy in this cage. She tells him about the time she had an opportunity to send him to Canada, but thought she could make him better here and didn't avail it. She regrets that decision heavily. Tae-soo is called to see Hwang, who congratulates him on the zoo revitalization and promotes him. He then reveals that the zoo will be sold to the Rokwon Group, and they have bought the surrounding land. He used his company to buy the zoo and revive it so that he could sell it at a better price to Rokwon. Tae-soo is appalled to hear this, and tries to convince Hwang not to bulldoze the zoo. He returns defeated to the zoo to tell everyone the bad news, but they're hosting a surprise party to celebrate the zoo's revival. Older employees also join in, but one of them tells them about the zoo being sold, and Tae-soo confirms this. This makes everyone disappointed and heartbroken, and they all leave, not giving a chance to Tae-soo to prove his ignorance. Tae-soo goes back, and the zoo closes. But after an altercation between Seo and the Rokwon Group, Han proposes that they start a media campaign against Rokwon for wanting to close the zoo. This works, and Min Chae-rung is livid at her company gaining more bad rep. Hwang is also visited by Sung Min, who reveals the fraud to the president. Tae-soo notices Sung Min at the office and follows Hwang as he goes to check the zoo. There, he tries to enter the polar bear's enclosure, and Han and Tae-soo try to stop him. He goes in thinking that the polar bear is fake and almost gets attacked. The real polar bear is then released to be viewed. But Hwang hangs around and, after confirming that the giraffe is fake, enters the polar bear's enclosure once again and confronts it. But the polar bear is very real and very grumpy, and provoked, he attacks the guy. Tae-soo dons the costume and goes out to distract Black Nose so the staff can retrieve the passed-out Hwang. They succeed, but Black Nose rips off Tae-soo's costume. Thankfully, he is saved. Later, Tae-soo tells the staff that he will take the blame on himself, but they all stop him, telling him that they were all responsible. Tae-soo then gets one final idea and goes to visit Min Chae-rung. He proposes that they purchase the zoo and convert it into an ecological park in her resort. This will give a place for the animals to live freely and also save her company's reputation. She agrees, and Tae-soo then gathers some evidence of corruption against Hwang to blackmail him into selling the zoo to Rokwon, and the president is forced to agree. We jump a few years later to see that the resort houses a beautiful ecological park, which contains very real animals. The original staff has also been hired by the Rokwon Company. The last scene shows us Dr. Han and Tae-soo visiting Black Nose, who has been transported back to Canada and is now living his days happily in his natural habitat. This is where the movie comes to an end. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.